Let's start the show. You already know who it is. My name is Mike Kyle, aka the Fantasy Vulture. I have over a decade worth of fantasy football experience and have continuously competed for fantasy championships over the course of the past 6 seasons. Let's make it 7 in 2020. On this episode of the FB Show, we are continuing our All-32 NFL team preview series, taking a look at every NFL team through the lens of fantasy football. We continue our AFC South previews with the Jacksonville Jaguars today. But before we get started, 3 quick things for you. First off, smash that subscribe button. Oh my god, I can't talk. Power running back style like Derrick Henry up the middle. Also hit that like button down below like an open receiver downfield, Patrick Mahomes style. And last but not least, shoot me a text 330-302-1554. That's going to be my source for all of my fantasy advice this season. I just like it more because I can message you one-on-one individually. We can have in-depth conversation around draft strategies and players and all that good sorts of things. So make it happen. Shoot me a text there. But let's just jump into it. I'm really excited for this team, but in a very, very weird way because there are not a whole lot of fantasy relevant players on this team right now as currently constructed. But there are some guys who I have a lot of interest in despite all of that. So let's take a look at the quarterback position and maybe the NFL's darling child all of last season in 2019. Gardner Minshew, the 6th round pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars, came in after Nick Foles got injured, and he kind of just lit the NFL on fire, not really like with his play, although there is partly of that, but more so just like his style and his swag, just super, super bizarre. But regardless, in 2019, let's talk about fantasy now. In 2019, he finished as quarterback 20 overall. But I think the thing before we even jump into this is the fact that this is a guy who was a 6th round pick, came in and was pretty much the starter for the entire season. I know when Nick Foles came back from injury, Nick Foles played for like a half, was awful, and then Minshew was substituted back in. But really just taking a look at and focusing this through the lens of a 6th round pick, I think is really important. So he finished in 2019 as quarterback 20 overall, and through that, he had a few weekly finishes at quarterback 1 with 5, 6 games as a quarterback 2, and 3 games as a quarterback 3. So those last 2 numbers are not the best, but a QB2 performances I have them pulled up here. He didn't really hurt you with those QB2 performances. There were a lot of things inside of 18 and above, or inside the top 18, and like that's pretty fine. For a quarterback. Obviously, we want to have a lot more QB1 performances because those are really the boom games, and we like those. But for a QB2, like he was pretty much just startable. You weren't getting killed by him by any means, not necessarily. So he had 285 passing completions, 470 attempts, 3,200 yards, 344 rushing yards, which I think was top 5 among quarterbacks. 21 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. When you take a look at the adjusted score, 16.8 points per game, 14 games played, a new finish of quarterback 18. I'm actually going to pull up those rushing stats real quick. Let's see. Where would I go to find that? Let's take a look here. NFL rushing leaders 2019. Because I want to say he finished in top 5, and that's going to be a big focal point for what I'm going to talk about as far as Minshew goes. Yards, sort by quarterback. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. So he was 5th among quarterbacks in rushing yards, and he actually finished ahead of Russell Wilson in that category by 2 yards, right? So we keep saying how mobile of a quarterback Russell Wilson is and how, that's one reason that makes him so viable in fantasy is because of the rushing upside. And if that's the case, we have to say the same thing about Gardner Minshew because you're looking right there and that is 34 points just off of rushing yards alone. And the fact that he doesn't necessarily make mistakes, you see only 6 interceptions, like that's a great number for a 6th round pick nonetheless, right? So his mistakes are automatically minimized due to the rushing upside, and that's kind of why I like Minshew a little bit this season. But I also like Minshew a lot because this Jags defense, is really depleted from what it once was. back just a few years ago. I mean, they've lost A.J. Bouye, they traded Jalen Ramsey, they traded Calais Campbell, Tevin Smith is gone, an MIA. Miles Jack was not the same player that he once was, and this defense just has a lot of holes in it right now, right? How many guys in the backfield or in the secondary of the Jacksonville Jaguars defense can you name, right? Because the only one that's coming up to mind is Henderson that they just drafted this season, and I used to be a Jags fan. Like, I knew this team inside out, right? So this has been quite the fall of a franchise that appeared to be ascending. So the reason why I like Minshew this year is because this is a guy that is going to throw the ball about 500 times, right? He was on pace to throw over 500 pass attempts. And this defense is bad. There's a lot of holes in it. So they're going to be playing from behind. So they're going to have to air it out. If you remember Blake Bortles just a few years ago, that was really around 2016, 2017. Blake Bortles was finishing in the top 10 of fantasy quarterbacks. He had a season in the top 5 because they were playing in garbage time and he was just airing the ball out left, right, and center. With Minshew, you see kind of the same thing right there, and that has me really excited for his fantasy outlook this season. But despite all of that, I still have him ranked as QB 24 just because if this offense stalls as well as the defense, they might be the lowest scoring offense in the league. And you can't rely on that, obviously, for fantasy football because we play in a game of production and mathematics. Those two things just don't go well with a bad offense and just a bad team overall. His ADP, he's basically being undrafted right now. As far as fantasy football calculator goes, his ADP is outside quarterback 27, and he's going outside of the outside of 1408. So you're getting him. So you can basically draft him with your last pick or so. So if you want to take a defense or a kicker early, just because you want to wait on a quarterback, just for those extra rounds, maybe draft Harrison Butker and then the Steelers defense like back to back. I think you'll be good to go there, and then you can just have Minshew, holding things steady for you. And that's what I think is really interesting. Another point as well. He's not going to hurt you. He's not necessarily going to hurt you, right? 3 games as a QB3. Obviously, we don't like that, and that's just not. That's very, very bad. Let's just call that what it is. But the points per game of 16, basically 17, that's fine. If you just want, that's not going to win you any weeks per se, but that's not going to kill you. And that has me kind of mildly excited for Minshew. If I plan to take a quarterback late, sure, the upside isn't there because we don't know how this offense is going to look. But knowing I just kind of get a baseline floor of 16, 17 points per game, if I'm waiting on a quarterback, I think I'm pretty okay with that. Is there any other notes regarding Gardner Minshew? I want to pull this game log real quick. Yeah, I really think just the big thing was that even though he had 6 games as a QB2, those games were really. I'm gonna read you off those finishes. Okay, so for the QB2 territory games, he finished as quarterback 15, 17, 18, 15, 22, and 16. So just going off that, if there was one game where he absolutely just murdered you, it was that 22 finish. But even then, that was 1 out of 6. So pretty much for 10 weeks, he was suitable, he was fine, and obviously having those 5 games as a QB1 performance is pretty helpful as well. And that could go up this season. That wouldn't shock me at all. So I think there is that's the thing. I'm trying to convince myself that Gardner Minshew may be fantasy viable. But ultimately, I see the reasons. This is a bad defense. They're going to throw the ball a ton because they're going to be playing from behind. There's a rushing upside. I just don't know how good Gardner fucking Minshew is. And that, I can't get a read on it. He's currently a guy that I'm considering late in drafts. But I don't know. I think I'd rather have a few other options that I know, where I know what the production value is going to be week in and week out. But now let's talk about one of my favorite players in the NFL, and that is Leonard Fournette. And the reason why Leonard Fournette is one of my favorite players in the NFL is, one, I used to be a Jacksonville Jaguars fan, so I feel like I need to say that. I'm talking about my ex-girlfriend, basically, with this entire team preview. And then secondly, I just love Jaguars running backs every single year, going back from Fred Taylor to Maurice Jones-Drew to now Leonard Fournette. Every single time the Jags have this dynamic rookie, everybody always undervalues them. but they end up to be incredible for fantasy. So I had Fournette during his rookie season. He dominated, and that was just a really, really fun time for my fantasy team. And he's just been a guy that I've been right about, even if his production on the field in real life has not been the best. But in 2019, his finish it was 13 in standard at the running back position and running back 9 in PPR. He's always finished inside, the top 15 when he's been healthy. I think, he's right around the running back 1 range, should I say, like that fringe. He has finished as a running back 1 previously. Outside of this, but really the story with Leonard Fournette is 2 things, at least as far as this year goes, right? Because this has been the story pretty much last year as well. So the volume is going to be there. If you look at his 2019 stats and just pretty much his entire career so far in the NFL, 265 touches. Last year, just a monster 76 receptions on 100 targets, 1,100 rushing yards, 522 receiving yards, and only 3 touchdowns. And that's going to be the story, I think, again this season. Because he is going to get the work. That passing volume is probably going to decrease with the addition of Chris Thompson, who I'm not going to be talking about in this preview because I don't think he's going to have too much value as far as fantasy goes, because I think they're going to run Fournette into the ground this year, which is another reason why I like him so much. But can he get into the end zone? Because Fournette just statistically last year was great. Like those first 3 columns, touches, rushing, and receiving, are incredible. And just the reason why he killed you, if you had him, was just the touchdowns, right? There's no way that Leonard Fournette is only going to score 3 times again. He caught 76 passes, did not have a receiving touchdown, and he only had 3 rushing touchdowns. That's never going to happen. The odds of that happening are so unlikely. We are going to have incredible positive regression for Leonard Fournette this season. He had 6 games of the running back 1. You love that. 4 games of the running back 2. Fine with that. And then just those 5 games of the running back 3. Meh. Now, obviously, he was being drafted super high last year, so that ended up killing you. But I don't think that's going to happen again, just because those touchdown numbers are going to come up, and that makes it highly unlikely. I'm looking to see where his running back 2 finishes were. So he finished as running back 23, 20, 20, and 22. All of his running back 1 performances were basically outside the top 4. He had 5, 7, 10, 9, 10, and then he had a running back 1 performance in week 12. Typically, though, I love running backs with volume and guaranteed volume, should I say. So that's why I love a guy who everybody is down on, like Leonard Fournette, like Jordan Howard, where no matter what, they are just going to be super safe for you week in and week out. And obviously those are 2 different levels of players. But just having that safety net of volume, for me, is just always super valuable in fantasy, especially at the running back position where only 32 guys are starting and maybe only 40 guys are valuable week in and week out, compared to the wide receiver position where you can plug in a wide receiver off waiver wires no matter what week it is, and you have the upside of scoring a touchdown. The adjusted score is basically like what I just said. He was so great as statistically, just a shade under 15 points per game, 15 games played. He was healthy, and a new finish of running back 11. The ADP is what I'm really kind of fascinated by, though, as far as Leonard Fournette goes, right? Because everything I just said is in line with his ADP. All the positives. He's going to get the volume. He's going to get some receiving work, though I expect that number to be dialed back. The touchdowns are going to go up, and we already know that he puts up yardage whenever he is on the field. Even if he does average less than 4 yards to carry, I don't care, because he's getting the ball 265 times. That doesn't matter. His yards per carry do not matter. So his ADP is currently going at running back 12 at 211. I don't understand this, because there are other running backs that I would rather have than Leonard Fournette, and it's simply just because the running back position is so it's front end deep, right? So it's very deep up front, and then it quickly dies down. It's kind of like an exponential curve type thing. Whereas I just don't know what players you're willing to draft Leonard Fournette over. So, for example, right, and I guess this is difficult just based off of the fact that Fournette constantly produces for you, because of that volume and just because he is one of the better fantasy backs, just consistently. I'm going to pull up where his fantasy finishes were. Let's see. Let's see how quick I can do this. Yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know. Where is my... All right. We got this pulled up. Let's see. Where did Fournette finish for you last season? This is 2018? Right, so Fournette only played 8 games in 2018. He finished as running back 40. His rookie season, I want to say, was top 10, 2017. Fournette was number 8 in 2017 in half point. He was a rookie. So then we go to 2019, right, because contracts. Wait, was he 2016 a rookie? Hang on. Fournette, right. So now my years are all mixed up. This is the... Did they not pick up his... Wait, he was a first-round pick. I'm now so confused. Wait, I need to pull up his contract. Leonard Fournette contract. Right, because it was a 4-year deal because he's a rookie. But he should get a 5th-year option. Okay, so even on Spotrac, they have his 5th-year option unavailable. Did they decline his 5th-year option? Hang on. Leonard Fournette, 5th-year option. Yes. Okay, so they declined Fournette's 5th-year option on May 1st. So that is, look, that was so long ago. Oh my goodness. But regardless, so all right, so we have a 3-year sample size of Leonard Fournette. And when Leonard Fournette is healthy, he has been a top 10 fantasy running back, which is why it makes sense for his ADP to be as a running back 1 at running back 12. You have the guaranteed volume, you're going to get the stats, you're going to get an increase in touchdowns, the receiving work's going to come down just a little bit. However, I have him ranked at running back 18, but I feel so bad about it. Like, Fournette is one of my favorite players, and I know what he can do. There must just be a lot of other running backs that I like instead, because that's kind of like the only possible explanation for this. So I have my rankings pulled up right now, and so right now I have my running back 12 to Fournette, all right? So I'm going to go for starting at running back 12 all the way down to 18 where I have him ranked. I have Josh Jacobs, Todd Gurley, Austin Eckler, Nick Chubb, Chris Carson, David Johnson, and then Fournette. So I'm just going to quickly break these down, I think. Josh Jacobs, I expect him to make a jump. I think he's going to have a much better season than he did last year, even though last season he was still really good. Todd Gurley, I just love that Atlanta offense. I think Todd Gurley is just a touchdown machine. I'd rather have Gurley, better offense. You're going to put more points. Austin Eckler, we saw what Eckler did last season. Now he's getting that number 1 role throughout the entire season and not splitting it with Melvin Gordon. I love Eckler this season. That offense is probably going to be towards the same level as the Jags, but probably just a bit better, and Eckler is going to see more receiving work. Nick Chubb's just one of the best running backs in the NFL. I think he's just a super talented guy. Stefanski coming in, I think they're going to treat him like Dalvin Cook in Cleveland, and we know what Dalvin Cook did in Minnesota. So that has me really interested in Nick Chubb. Chris Carson, better offense, same volume as Fournette. So I'll take the points there in Seattle. David Johnson, I don't know what the volume situation is going to look like in Houston for David Johnson, but I assume it's probably going to be pretty high. He's also a great pass catcher, and they traded, not only did they trade DeAndre Hopkins for him, but they also are taking on all of his salary this season. So I think he's just going to be utilized. Once again, a better offense. And we're going to talk about the Texans in a future video coming up real soon. So I see why Fournette is being drafted as a running back 1. I just don't know if he gets there. I'm sure he probably will, but I'm Like if you told me I have Leonard Fournette on my fantasy team, I'm going to be so happy. I'm going to be so thrilled. But I just don't see how he finishes as a running back one with all of this competition. Like there's only 12 spots and we have 18 to 20 great running backs in the NFL. So I'm baffled by this. I get it. I just can't get there myself. I'm still all in on Leonard Fournette, though, despite that. Like, I don't want it to sound like I'm knocking him because I felt like I've praised him during this entire 10-minute segment, but I just can't get there. There's too many other running backs that I would rather have, but if I get Leonard Fournette, I'm going to be ecstatic because I know I'm getting a guy who's going to get a total of 300 touches this season. All right, let's talk about the two receiving options for this team who I think are fantasy relevant. The first one is DJ Chark, who cemented himself as this team's number one wide receiver last season. In 2019, his finish in both standard and PPR was wide receiver 16. His weekly finishes, he had 4 games as a wide receiver 1, 2 games as a 2, and 3 games as a 3. 118 targets, 73 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. When you look at the adjusted score, 12.6 points per game on 15 games played. His new finish is going to be wide receiver 18. So DJ Chark is really interesting because the entire hype during all last offseason was Dede Westbrook, and Dede Westbrook's going to be the one that cements himself as this team's number one wide receiver, but instead it was DJ Chark. And with Chark, it was kind of a tale of two halves for him. So his the first half of the season essentially was when he did all of his damage, right? So week 1, he starts off the season with the wide receiver 8 performance. Week 2, he was wide receiver 15. Week 3, wide receiver 19. Week 4, I don't know if he was injured or if he just busted entirely that game. And then week 5, he had a wide receiver 4 performance. So that was the first half of the season. You saw that's clearly where he did a ton of his work with both of his wide receiver 2 finishes coming in there, as well as 2 of his wide receiver 1 performances. And then things really died off. So for the rest of the season, through week 6 onwards, he had 2 games as a 1 and 2 games as a 3. Actually, he had 3 games as a 3. So it was a tale of two halves for Chark. He started off red hot, and then he cooled off significantly. I'm not really sure what the issue was, but regardless, getting 118 targets in your second year in the NFL with the guy who is a 6th-round pick and just being thrown into the starting quarterback position once Foles got hurt during the first quarter of Week 1 against Kansas City, that just tells me that the two have a building and budding chemistry, because there's no way that this dude just randomly got 118 targets. So Minshew definitely values Chark, and as a result, I do as well, because I value Minshew being this guy who's just going to lead this team, who's coming back for comeback wins or just while trailing from behind. Like I said, this offense is basically going to be predicated upon garbage time points, and I'm totally cool with that because garbage time points are still points. Ultimately, his ADP is currently wide receiver 22 going in the 5th round. I have him ranked as wide receiver 21. I want to see who they have above him, who ADP has above him, because I think the questions around DJ Chark are really just, are you going to get consistency that we saw through the first 5 weeks of last season? Because if you are, you might be getting a steal, and if not, I actually, that's the thing with Chark, I don't think he's going to kill you, right? If you draft Chark at wide receiver 20 through 25, just in that ballpark, I think I'm okay with it because the upside's there. And also, no matter what, I just think he's going to be valuable. I don't think he finds a way to really let you down this season. So DJ Chark is going at wide receiver 22. So let's see. They have Keenan Allen ahead of him, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Lockett. That is the group right there that goes ahead of him. Behind him is Deebo Samuel, Odell, Robert Woods, AJ Green. What is happening? Dude, I have always questioned myself if I should be using Fantasy Football Calculator, because I use their ADP when I make these things, because I like how they have the ADP timeline between, this is the data from 1,181 mock drafts between July 30th and August 4th. So I love how they give you a consistent timeline of when this data is. But the fact that it has Odell, Robert Woods, AJ Green, and Juju behind DJ Chark, part of me always questions, how accurate is that actually? Because if we're living in a world where DJ Chark is going ahead of those guys, what world are we living in? So I'm going to take a look right now. And I never do this, but I want to. ESPN Fantasy Football ADP. Now, obviously, this is different, and I believe that Fantasy Football Calculator's ADP is more so comprised of the expert data than anything else. But even so, I'm looking at this right now. Let's see. Yeah, because that's the other thing that's very, very difficult about ADP is that it varies by platform. So I should have always probably started off by saying that the ADP that I use is from Fantasy Football Calculator because I like how it gives me everything all in one place. And I don't really have a need to be a ADP slave to the other platforms, whether it's ESPN, CBS, or Yahoo, whatever the case, or whatever platform that you're playing on. So looking at this at ADP based off of ESPN, because I'm sure that's where a lot of you are playing, right? Like Juju's ahead by a long shot. Odell's at 14. Juju's at 12. Robert Woods is 19. Chark is 27. So now I'm a bit in my head about these ADP rankings, but I know a lot of people use Fantasy Football Calculator as well, so I think I'm just going to stick with it, and we'll figure it out from there. But regardless, going back to DJ Chark and going away from that ADP side tangent, I like Chark this year. I don't like him if he's your number 1, but if he's your number 2, or hell, if you could also get him as your wide receiver 3 this season, I'm totally cool with it. The Jags are going to be a team just playing from behind. He clearly has a clear chemistry with Gardner Minshew. I just don't know what version of Chark you're going to get because we have seen both sides of the spectrum with it. However, I lean towards side 1. Just a second year in this offense, a second year with Minshew. I think he's going to be really smooth and very consistent for fantasy football this season. Give me all the shares of DJ Chark that I can get. And lastly, we're only doing 4 because like I said, this Jags offense is just very meh. There's not a whole lot of fantasy viability here. And that is Dede Westbrook, who crashed and burned, maybe unlike any wide receiver I've ever seen in fantasy. Dede Westbrook was a guy that came into last season with the hype of Nick Foles throwing to the slot. He was also just a super talented wide receiver in the NFL, and we were expecting a big step forward, and that unfortunately just never materialized. So in 2019, he finished as wide receiver 50 in standard and wide receiver 45 in PPR. 1 game as a wide receiver 1, 2 games as a wide receiver 2, 3 games as a wide receiver 2, and 3 games as a wide receiver 3. He had 101 targets, 66 catches, 660 yards, and 3 touchdowns. 8.3 points per game, 15 games played, a new finish of wide receiver 59. Guys, I don't know what to do with Dede Westbrook. Part of me wants to buy the post-hype sleeper because he's going at wide receiver 65 in round 14. I have him ranked at wide receiver 67, though. I have no idea what to expect. I think he's done. I think he's just a complimentary wide receiver, and that makes me really sad because he's on my dynasty team, and I probably can't get anything for him at this point. Because, you know, like I said, the big reason why we were all in on Westbrook last year was because Nick Foles and his history with the slot. And Minshew just doesn't do that. Minshew would rather just sling it deep, be a bit of a gunslinger, a bit of a risk taker, and that's more so DJ Chark's role than anything else. And not to mention the fact that they also drafted Laviska Shenault out of Colorado to be the team's number 2 wide receiver. So that also puts Dede Westbrook a bit because we're going to slide him down because Shenault's going to come in and eat up targets there. And it's sad. It's really sad. I'm out on Dede, and it breaks my heart because he is on my dynasty team. And now I'm down another wide receiver in that who I thought had a lot of potential. It's just bad times, right? Ultimately, Westbrook, if you want, probably a flex play. And because this season is so wacky because of COVID and we're going to rely on depth more than dart throws this season, he's probably fine as a flex option week in and week out. 101 targets is a good number. We're going to see that catch rate probably go up. If Westbrook can catch 75 passes, which isn't a massive jump, that's an extra 9. Cool with that. That yards, can we get his yardage up to 800? Would love that. Let's just make Westbrook hopefully as viable as possible. I had to start him multiple times last season, And while he certainly didn't kill me, it's not like he won me any weeks. I probably started him on all 3 of his wide receiver 2 finishes, as well as I think probably all 3 of his wide receiver 3 finishes as well. And I came out fine. I still made the playoffs. So he's definitely flex worthy, but probably nothing else more than that, unfortunately. And that's going to do it for our Jacksonville Jaguars fantasy football team preview, all 32. It's tough. It's going to be rough sledding in Jacksonville, I think, this season, but there is room for upside. I just don't know. I'm so on the fence about Minshew, and can he actually be fantasy relevant on a week in, week out basis? I know he's not going to kill me, but is he going to win me any weeks? As far as Fournette goes, my goodness, I love him. He's my favorite. He's one of my favorite players in the NFL. He's probably going to finish near a running back 1. I just have him ranked a little bit lower just because of the amount of great running backs there are at the top of the league right now. And then between DJ Chark and Dede Westbrook, I'm out on Westbrook. I just don't think it happens unless that volume goes up a little bit more and he sees more consistent targets, because I think that was another big thing as well. The targets were always just super spread out and sporadic. And I'm all in on DJ Chark. I don't love him as my number 1. I don't love him as my number 1 option at the wide receiver position. But if I can get him at my 2 or my 3, I'm all in, because they're just going to chuck the ball a ton because they're going to be down by 1 million, and that's just going to lead for fantasy points. Like, fantasy points are one of those things where game-wise, it doesn't matter how you get them, just as long as you do. But there are little nuances to that. I'm going to make a whole video talking about the difference between how you get fantasy points, and that's kind of more important than how many fantasy points you get. And it's all in here. It's all about how you see it. It's all mathematics and statistics and things like that. But that's why we love this game, right? All right, I think that's it for this video. Once again, be sure to subscribe down below so you never miss one of these. We're doing 32 of them for every single team. On top of that, I'm also going to be cranking out more content as far as strategy and draft ideas and all these different, all these fun topics, should I say. Also, leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much. You can check out the podcast version of this if you'd rather listen to that instead of watching it. That is at Fantasy Vulture, wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow me on all social media at FFVulture, and website's fantasyvulture.com, and shoot me a text, 330-302-1554. That's going to be my hub for all my fantasy advice this season. All right, that's all I got. Remember, people come and go, but fantasy championships are forever. I'm out. Later.